In May of 1902, a man sat in a stone cell on a Caribbean island, serving time for a bar fight. He had no way of knowing that his cell, windowless, half-buried, and built to hold the worst prisoners, was about to become the safest place on the island. Within days, the city above him, home to 28,000 people, would be wiped from the face of the earth in less than a minute, and he would be one of only a handful left alive. This is the story of Mount Pelée, the eruption that destroyed the city of Saint-Pierre, and how a looming election helped to kill it. Saint-Pierre, on the French island of Martinique, was the jewel of the Caribbean. They called it the Paris of the West Indies, a city of theaters and cafes, cobbled streets and tramways, gardens and grand stone houses tumbling down to a busy harbor. Above it all rose Mount Pelée. For generations the volcano had slept, gentle and green. People picnicked on its slopes. To the 28,000 souls below, it was scenery, not a threat. But in April of 1902, the mountain began to stir. First came the smell of sulfur drifting through the streets, then a fine gray ash settling on rooftops and gardens like dirty snow. The tremors grew, the summit began to growl and smoke, and then came something out of a nightmare. Driven down the mountain by the heat and fumes, thousands of animals fled into the city. Snakes, deadly fer-de-lance vipers, poured through the streets. Giant centipedes and swarms of insects followed. In the chaos, the snakes killed dozens of people and hundreds of animals before they could be stopped. The birds went quiet. The horses panicked in their stables. To anyone paying attention, the land itself was screaming a warning. Many in Saint-Pierre wanted to leave, but they were not allowed to, because in 11 days, on the 11th of May, Martinique was due to hold a crucial election. And the men in power needed the voters of Saint-Pierre to stay exactly where they were. So the authorities went to work, not to evacuate the city, but to convince it there was nothing to fear. A commission was sent up the mountain. It returned with a verdict: the safety of Saint-Pierre is completely assured. The governor pressured the city's newspaper to calm the public and to urge everyone to remain. And to be certain, soldiers were posted on the road out of the city, with orders to turn back anyone trying to flee toward safety. It was a trap. The people who most wanted to escape were kept inside the city, and worse, terrified villagers from the slopes of the volcano fled downhill into Saint-Pierre, believing the city was the safe place to be. On the 5th of May, the mountain gave one last, unmistakable warning. The crater lake burst its wall, and a torrent of boiling mud roared down a river valley, burying a rum distillery and everyone in it in seconds, and throwing up a wave that surged across the harbor. Dozens died in an instant. It was a perfect, terrible preview of what the mountain could do. And still, with the election days away, the order held. No one was to leave. To prove the city was safe, the governor himself traveled to Saint-Pierre with his wife, to stay among the people and steady their nerves. It was a decision that would cost them their lives. Through the night of the 7th of May, Mount Pelée roared without pause. The summit glowed red. Lightning flickered in the ash clouds. The people of Saint-Pierre lay awake in the dark, trapped between a screaming mountain and the men who told them to stay. Then came the morning of the 8th of May, Ascension Day. The dawn was strangely calm. The harbor was crowded with ships. The cathedral bells rang for the holy day. It was 7:52 in the morning. And then the side of the mountain tore open. Two clouds erupted at once. One shot straight up into the sky, but the other, the killer, burst sideways, low and flat, straight down the mountain toward the city. It was a thing that science barely had a name for, a glowing avalanche of superheated gas and ash. It was hotter than 1,000 degrees, hot enough to melt glass, and it came down the slope at 100 miles an hour. The people of Saint-Pierre had no time to run, no time to pray. The cloud crossed the distance from the summit to the city in well under a minute. It struck the city like the breath of a furnace. In a single instant, Saint-Pierre was flattened, set ablaze, and silenced. Stone walls were knocked flat. The great rum casks in the warehouses exploded. Even the ships in the harbor caught fire where they floated. Of the 28,000 people in Saint-Pierre, almost every single one died in less than a minute. It remains one of the deadliest volcanic eruptions in human history. Out in the harbor, the ships became infernos. On the steamer Roraima, a few souls survived the firestorm, terribly burned, to describe a wave of fire that had swept over the water itself. Only one ship managed to limp out of the burning bay to carry the news to the world. Then the ash blotted out the sun, and a false night fell over the ruins. Where a glittering city had stood at dawn, there was now only smoking rubble, silence, and gray. But deep in the rubble of the city's prison, in a cell half sunk into the ground, something impossible had happened. The man serving time for a bar fight was still alive. His name was Ludger Sylbaris. The cell that was meant to punish him had saved him. Its thick stone walls and single narrow slit had blunted the killing heat. A blast of fire had still poured through that slit and burned him badly. But he had lived, and he was trapped. For 4 days he lay in the dark, badly burned, with no food and no water, calling out into a silent, dead city, until at last a rescue party heard his cries and dug him free. He had heard no screams during the disaster, he said, no cries, only a sudden roaring heat, and then silence. He was the only living witness to the death of a city from inside its walls. A few others had survived against impossible odds. A shoemaker on the city's edge, a young girl who had fled by boat into a seaside cave. But out of 28,000, you could count the survivors of Saint-Pierre on your fingers. When rescuers came ashore, they found a city frozen in its final second. Clock stopped at 7:52. A place that had been alive with 28,000 people at breakfast was, by mid-morning, a tomb of ash. The danger was not even over. 12 days later, on the 20th of May, Mount Pelée erupted again, this time killing rescue and salvage workers who had returned to the ruins. In the months that followed, the volcano did something stranger still. From its crater, a colossal spine of solid lava was slowly pushed upward, a tower of rock that rose hundreds of meters into the sky before it crumbled away. They called it the Tower of Pelee. Scientists rushed to Martinique from around the world. What they witnessed rewrote the science of volcanoes. That low, glowing, racing cloud was given a name, the Nuée Ardente, the glowing cloud, and this exact kind of eruption is still called Peléan to this day. From the ashes of Saint-Pierre, modern volcano monitoring was born. The watching, the warning, the evacuating that has saved countless lives since. The city died so that others might be warned in time. And then came the reckoning. The governor who had urged the city to stay had died in the eruption alongside the people he reassured. The election he had tried to protect was never held in Saint-Pierre because there was no one left to vote. As for the prisoner who lived, Ludger Sylbaris was pardoned. The man condemned to a cell had been saved by it. He went on to tour the world with the Barnum and Bailey circus, billed as the man who survived Judgment Day, telling the story of the morning his city vanished. Saint-Pierre was rebuilt, but it never came back to life. The Paris of the West Indies became a quiet town in the shadow of the mountain, its grand old ruins standing among the new. And the cell that saved one man still stands there today. Mount Pelée is watched now, day and night, but its lesson was never really about the mountain. The volcano gave a full month of warnings. It growled, it smoked, it rained ash and snakes and mud. It did everything but speak. 28,000 people did not die because no one knew. They died because the people who knew chose silence, and a city was never allowed to listen. The mountain only had to wait.